Okay. So we're going to get started, if you don't mind. Start sharing screen. Okay, good. All right, so we're going to go on with the lab today. And then if we have time, we can try to address some questions if you have about the project. Yeah, so first, I apologize that we had to change this over and over again, but that's how we get it better. Hopefully with the new data, these are going to be feasible in a short amount of time. So yeah, in the future, if you see that some of the labs are difficult to do in say 2-3 hours, and you want to do them before class, just keep the parts that are too difficult, or you find too difficult, and you let me know. So I try to address them. All right, so exercise 1 to 5. I have it here. Let me just, okay. Oh, good. Sorry. Yes, this is good enough. So we're going to start here. I'm not cloning, but again, this is the same code that you have. Okay, and let me just close everything. So we start from the beginning. Yeah, okay, that's good. Okay, so let me do the npm install just to make sure everything is good. That npm run serve. There we go. Okay, so lab 1, exercise 1. So this one is very simple. It's just copy and paste. So rather than do it, I'll just talk about the code. So we haven't seen them, but this is the markup for a table. So the table is created by rows that are marked with the TR. And then the columns are either TH or TD. TH, if it's a header, in that case, they will come up bolded, I think. And otherwise, the TD, that is the element, HTML element for the column. The inner HTML, that is the part of text that is a node, remember. That is inside here is the text that appears inside the cell. And here we have some CSS rules. So that fine-tune a little bit the defaults so that we get what we want in terms of aesthetics. You see that some of these are multiple parameters, such as the border. It has 1 pixel, so it's black. So again, getting the parameters right is kind of complicated. the best thing that you can do is just to look at the code in the inspector, and then the inspector allows you to see that what is available. So I'm going to do it just for this one. Okay. Maybe I pasted it at the wrong place. I think I pasted it down here. And then we can call the inspector. You remember the key bindings. So it's good to have them in mind. Option Command I on Mac, I think is the command is replaced by the Windows key on Windows. And then you go here with the select, and you can go and look at those. So you see here, we'll see this maybe next week. This pop-up here has a lot of the information that you may want to know about this particular element in the page. And that includes everything that has to do with accessibility. It means that they give you information about how well the contrast is set up. And then the name here and role, etc., are usually used by the browser for helping people that have reading disability, for instance. So those you want to set them up if they're not set up. So here it looks good in all respects. And then in the elements, so here I'm going to redo it again because I didn't click. Okay. So you remember that on the right side here we can see the style that is applied. So you remember that the style in CSS is hierarchical. So the style of the table might influence the style of the header. And so that's why they put you all this information, and they tell you what is inherited from the parents. Right, so the border collapse here is inherited from the table for the TH element. And here you see the syntax for the border, and if you want to go and change it, yeah, they normally I think it does tell you, but when you have multiple parameters, it doesn't do a good job. Yeah, so here we set the border to Alice Blue, and probably is not going to do anything because we need to put the solid, and the default might be one. Where is it? Yeah. So you see the default is that there is no border. So that might be because in my pages I'm setting the default, or it's because it's the default that is implemented in the browser. And that's why we don't see anything, right? Otherwise, we would be able to see the color. So for that, you would need to go and look up the documentation online, which is documented by different location. I think the W3 standard are the authoritative place to go and look those up. All right. So let's go back to the page. We don't need the Zoom meeting. Nope. Oh, the page is there. Sorry. Okay. So the select and append, this is just a straight implementation of what we've seen in class with the select and append mechanism. And then you remember there is the data join mechanism, so that we try both. And here there is nothing very exciting to see. We basically select the element where we want to append as the last child. whatever we want to append. So we start here by creating the table element with select of a div that is here. So if you start by creating a table, obviously you just select the table by ID, and then you don't need to append it. But here we don't have a table, so that's the way to go. Then we create the row, and we keep a reference to it, so that we can append the rest of the rows to the table. Sorry, I said row, but it's table. We keep a reference to the table so we can append the rest of the rows, right? So nothing terribly interesting about that. So with the data join, it's a little bit more complicated, but it's also more rewarding. And you remember that we saw this in class. The data join here is just doing array operations. And so because here we have a hierarchical data structure, it's a little bit more complicated than that's what we saw in class. And that's why I'm giving you the code so that you can try to wrap your head around. So the basic way in which it works, this particular way of applying the data join is that the data join allows you to work with a matrix type that is an array of array. And that's in the documentation. If you can go and read it. I put it in here at the bottom. And so the important parts are highlighted. And what they say is that here, the specified data is an array of arbitrary values, numbers or objects, or a function that returns an array of values for each group. So you can pass your data as groups of data. That's what you're doing. So we have an array of arrays, and for each one of the groups, then you can have access to their individual values, right? So to the data. So here it says the data is specified for each group in the selection. So you remember the selection is this object that is returned when you do the data join. So here we have a selection that is the enter selection that is returned after the dot enter with the parentheses. If the selection on multiple groups, such as d3 select all, followed by selection.select all, then data should typically be specified as a function. This function will be evaluated for each group in order, being passed the group's parent datum, D, which may be undefined, the group index. So what this means is they're just telling you that you can use either a function of T, and this we've seen already, or a function of T and I, where I is the index, such as here. And the selections parent nodes, which here we don't really need to use, with this as the group's parent element. So if we look at the code, we can just go and read it. Again, this is declarative syntax. So you don't want to understand what every line really is doing, because it's not procedural, but you need to understand what is it that one block of code does. So this is a data join where we're doing the data join with this array of arrays, where the array of array has basically one row, self-contained as a list of elements in the array. So here we do a select all, and you see that we do one select all here, and then we repeat it here. So this is basically to use what the mechanism that they're describing here. So we select all rows. So obviously at the start, we don't have any rows. So we're going to join that with our array of rows. Whenever we do the enter. And so we'll be creating 3 rows at this point, right? And for each row, what we want to do is append the TR element, right? And that's the outer, is this one. So up until now, we have appended. So when we say appended, means that they're actually created already. 3 TR elements, and now we need to go and add whatever is in each one of the rows. So for this here, you see that we take the row that is the current selection, because that's what gets returned by the append. And then we do a second append on top of that, where we basically can go through the inner array elements here. Okay, so this is another data join, because here we do the data join on the row before we did it on the table to add the rows. Here we do it on the row to add the columns. Okay, so same thing, we just do the enter and the append. Here we're doing we're not specializing the elements that we're creating. We're going with TDs. If you want to say for the first one, do something different, then you would need to somehow specify it here when you do the append TD. Which is probably tricky to do, because you can, yeah, we need to see if the append actually gets also the function. Yeah, it should. Yeah, and in that case, we do a ternary operation there to decide that the first row is going to be a TH as opposed to a TD. So if you're curious, you can give it a try. It might work or it might not, depending on what the append function allows you to do. And here, these Ds that we have are from the inner arrays. Okay, so don't get confused. This second data join here is done on each one of the rows, right? One at a time. So here it's basically building the hierarchy from 2 data join. The first one goes to the rows of the matrix array that are its elements, and the second one goes to the elements of the inner arrays that are the content of the tables. Okay, is that clear? So the rest of the code here is just basically the same thing, where we're actually changing. You see the style. So we don't try to create TH and TD, but we just say for the first one, let's do something spatial. So for the first row, we're using the CSS inheritance, and so we're setting the font to bold on the whole row, which will give us the same thing as a TH would give us, but in a different way. And then the second difference is that you see we're just using the chaining syntax for the 2 data join, so everything is in one block of code. All right, so nothing spatial there to look at. Yeah, so yeah, maybe I can show you. Yeah, maybe I can show you how to do this, so you know. So who's familiar with the multi-cursor selection in this idea or anyone on the other one? Okay. So this is the last box here. Okay. So what we need to do is this. Okay, so here the question is, and we're going to see this coming up all the time, is you have some data and then you need to put it in a form that is useful for D3 to use, or for that matter, for any other tool. And what people tend to do is that they forget the second part, and they just concentrate on the data and think as the task at hand, that is, let's put the data into a file, and then I'll figure it out once I have it there. And because all these tools are using array-like data structures, regardless if you do CSV or JSON, you want to make sure that you set up the data so that you can plot it as easily as possible. So you don't want to complicate your plotting code. It's complicated enough like that. So when you actually put your data into a file or in format so that you can just use it, you want to do it in the simplest manner possible for the plotting. And so how do you do that? Well, you start from the from what is the output, that is what you're expecting, and this is what here is going to make your life easier to set up this matrix with this data, and then you want obviously the result to be the final table, but with without making any changes to the code, because otherwise you're losing your time. So that's one key point to look at. The other one is to realize that in this table, as in other, in general in graphics, there are things that are not going to come with the data. And that's why usually when you have a data set, it has metadata that is attached to it that you need to go and look at, right? So here in this particular case, the metadata here is the table column labels. And here you see label, description, frequency, percent relative frequency. Now, you can try to put it, if it comes natural, in here, but most of the time you will have a hard time to do it. And the reasons are multiple. One is that this is plotting the data and is not plotting the metadata. So you're kind of forcing it in. Even if it's sometimes natural to put it in there, it might not. Yeah, if you can mute yourself, I don't know who's talking. Thank you. Yeah, if it's labels, it's easy, but yeah, say if you think about putting it into objects, because you're going to read this in either CSV or JSON, and then the key is going to be what allows you to access different fields, right? Now, if you try to force here percent rel dot rec dot into a variable name, then you're stuck putting it as a string, right? And then in your code, you cannot access things with data.key. You will need to do data with whatever strange thing that you need in there. And these are multiple problems. Can somebody tell me why this is problematic? Right. So let's say here, let's take relative frequency. So this I'm going to call it red frame. Okay. And so instead of writing this in your code, let's say that you decide to write it in your file in the way it's written there, is %. Can somebody tell me why this is problematic?
Like for when you are entering strings like integer.
Yeah. So what you're saying is that I cannot write this, right? I cannot go and write dot %. That's not going to apply, right? Yeah. Okay. So that's why we're putting it on a string, okay? And so the way to access it in a string is that you need to use this notation with array of the string. And that returns basically the same thing. Yeah. But why is that problematic? Writing code like this. I mean, in general, right? So to start with, if you look at this, just count the number of characters here that you need to type, right? So do you want to go and type and change all of this every time you need to do a plot, and all your variables are this long? Your code is going to be unreadable. You're going to spend hours typing it. If you do any typo in here, there is no type check in there, right? So if I make a mistake in this, it's going to appear, the return value is going to be undefined, right? And your code will not work. Okay. Other reason is if you're trying to do some reusable charts, then here it's a frequency table. I can do a frequency table of anything, right? You just give me the data in this format, and then I'm going to put this piece of text can be a parameter of my reusable table, right? Then I can just go and change the data, and things will, the same code will work, right? If you hard code the name of the variable into your code, then you're stuck rewriting, okay? So always prefer the dot notation here, always, okay? And I say this because the temptation is to just go look online and cut and paste, and then you're in trouble. So let me show you how I would put this in. So it's here. So let's first check that it's actually appearing there. Yes, it appears. So that's the first step. Every time you want to, and I think we've been doing this, every time you do a graphic, you want to start by making sure that your starter code is working, okay? Don't try to write too much code without checking, because then you're stuck debugging. So all we need to do basically is here replace all these fields with this. Okay. So how do you do this in less time that it takes to type it? Yes, no? Somebody has a suggestion? So I don't want to go and cut and paste every one of these into the table, right? Because here I have 3 rows, here I have 7, whatever. Okay, so how do you do it? So you can use an external program to reformat your data and to output an array of arrays here, right? and that's what is the best probably. If you have a lot of rows that you need to process, you don't want to do this by hand. If you can load them into an editor and it's a finite amount, then what I suggest is that you use the multi-cursor. Here you need to start learning how it works, but once you know, then you can just use it. And here it is. I'm going to, so you notice that I used a single quote because I find it cleaner to read. Whatever you use, stick to your convention. Okay. Okay, so there are limitations to this too, because you can see that here I want to get to the end of this line and it doesn't work, so I need to go and reset these. So it's still some labor, but it's probably less work than what you think, because now we're more or less done. We need to put, yeah, this one we can remove it, and we need to put, we just need to close it. Yeah, okay. All right, and then we forgot to put the commas at the end. And is this right? Okay, now a lot of time you're formatting things, and I've seen people play using what is it, not plus plus. So get away from it, because in JavaScript you might have noticed already that as soon as you make a little mistake, then things don't work, and it takes you ages to understand what is going on. So the Visual Studio Code gives you information on what is going wrong with syntax errors and so on. So just use it. And then it gives you also help on formatting. So here I don't want to go and push these lines one at a time. So I can just hit the shortcut that is the format block, or you can format the whole thing. And you're done. Okay. Okay, and here it is. We get the table. So obviously you need to arrange it a little bit. So you get the first line in. That again is not in the data. So there is no point to try to force it in there. Just do it the way you know to do it. You can either create already a table with a th, and then you add tds, right? Because you don't have, if you don't have th tds in the table and you just have one th, the data join, you know that it's going to work. Or you, after you create the table, you do the insert and append to select the table. And there the append will not work. Why it will not work? Because append appends as the last child. So you want to append a row first in the table, so you need to use the insert. So you might remember I had a slide, yeah, with insert that does that. Okay. So if there are no questions about that, I'll go on with the second one. All right, so bar chart with divs. So here again, it's mostly about copying and pasting. I'm asking that you label the bars, which is straightforward, because if you just cut and paste this, I think you get directly what you want. And at the title, you can just add a paragraph with whatever you think is appropriate. So the date of 1.3 is the one from the table that we just got. So we can just copy it back here. So here you need to reformat it to match this this format here of name value. So obviously you need to create key property values for the 4 or 5 things that are in each one of the columns of the example one table. And yeah, and then that's it. So, okay. Yeah, I think I'm asking that you create one for frequency and one for relative frequency. So they're going to look the same. One is going to be bigger than the other because the relative frequency is capped at 100, or a part in 100. I don't know if it's called it as 0, 1 or on a scale of 100. Okay, so and then this is, so doing bar charts like this, sometimes it's useful. If you have some data and you need just a simple bar chart, that works. That works. You know, why make things complicated when you can make them simple enough? And the simplicity here is for the user, so that it doesn't need to wait too long for the drawing to happen, and you don't spend too much time in the coding. Now, if you want to do it with the bars, it's a little bit more complicated because essentially SVG, and we're going to see how you can simplify this type of code. We're Wednesday, actually. But for now, we're stuck dealing with all the little bits of math that you need to basically place your bars around and to realize the plot. So maybe I'm going to show you quickly how to do this one. Here we're at the bottom. Okay, so we first check that this works. Okay, so we're happy. Then we go and in one, and we get our data. Where is our data again? Here it is. Okay, and then we're down here. So we're going to get here and do the same thing that I did a second ago. So here we need to create keys. So I'm going to, so what was again? It was label, right? Label, and this is a string. So we want it as a string. So this is description. So we're going to call it desk. Okay. So this is another way in which people tries to cheat the system. Right? What is it shorter to type, desk or description? Right? So I prefer to type the shortest version as long as it's easier to understand than to try to put description, because then if you want to use that to put it in the table, you need to go and get the keys, which with the data join is not that easy to do. And then you'll want to capitalize it. So you're going to do tons of work for nothing, because this is going to appear one in whatever chart that you do. Either is going to be the axis label or is going to be the header in the table. So you don't want to start making things complicated when it's not needed. Okay, let me reset this. Okay, so this is the frequency. Let me move the zoom window out of the way. Okay. Oh, I lost it, sorry. And vel free frag will do. Okay, we remove this. I'm going to indent manually, even though I said that you can indent automatically. And here we have it. Now the code is not going to work because we changed name label with name and so on, right? Oops, where is my window? It's here. Right, so everything is gone. And that's what happens when you don't, you make a typo on the name of the variable. So defreeze is undefined and says, oh, so then I don't know what you want me to plot. I'd rather pass it on to the SVG and then the browser decides that, well, if you have this element that has an attribute that is undefined, then I won't show it, right? So now we need to go and look at name. What was it, name? Okay, so you see we have name here. We're using it to set the text. So the text, we want to set it to label. And you see that the IDE is helping us there. Okay, so hopefully we're going to, oops, I'm sorry. So now we have our labels. We see that the chart is not big enough, so we need to go change it, right? So this is the width and the height. So we need to go and see, so here width and height 20, and so 20 is definitely not enough because we're cutting one of them. So we go up here and I don't know, we're going to put 100. Whoops. With D1, so things. Oh. Width padding. Okay, I don't know what happened there. Oh, is that the width of the bars? Width plus padding. Okay, let's leave it to 20 for the moment and think about it. Let's size the bars, and then once we have them, then we'll figure out the size of the size of this I think are the size of the bars. The size of the SVG is set up here, right? So here we need 150. Yeah, so that's good enough. And now we need to map. So this is supposing that this is the frequency. Now I don't want to kill myself and go put the count. The count is here, so okay. Although otherwise I would just do it in HTML. So this is good. And then we want to map frequency to whatever we had before. That was value, I think. Yeah, here it is. So here again, you can use the multi-cursor. You can search for value and boom, oops, dot fric. Oh, I'm sorry. Okay, here it is. So here we're doing the plot, but you see that it's too much. So we need to go and resize the SVG accordingly so that it works. Then the text there appears in white. So we'll need to change this to black and so on. Yeah, so little things. Are there any question about this? I think here we're doing, you remember the slide from last time? We're getting the enter selection. Because if you try to do separate data join where you have multiple things that you want to append at the same for the same data entry, then it's not going to work. So here we're getting the enter selection. For each enter selection, we're adding a rectangle and then adding a text, as opposed to try to do this in completely chained syntax. Because after the append, what we get is a reference to the object that is appended, that is the rectangle, and then the text might get appended to the rectangle, and then SVG doesn't have a hierarchy, and so it doesn't work. Okay. Again, don't write code randomly. You need to understand the pattern and what you want to do, and make sure that the patterns applies to what you want to do. So here we're doing the data join with appending two separate elements for each datum. Yeah, so all these are niceties, you know, to make things look nice. The math there are obvious, but they're tedious because you need to spend time to do the right thing. So a lot of it has to do with the fact that the origin is not bottom left where you usually want it for plotting, but it's up and left. And so you need to do things like this. Yeah. And if you don't do it, then things may not appear in the figure at all. Yeah, and then here we're a little bit killing ourselves because we're setting up individual style properties, right? So here you see that I'm also switching between attribute and style. That's fine as long as there is an attribute that maps to the style. But again, these 3 lines of code, we just can put them in a class and just apply a class, which is done, I think, with something is called class. So we're going to see how to cut on this code to make it more concise and faster to use. Oh, you see that here this is the result of my replace everywhere. I think this was value. I replaced value with frequency, and so it appears there. All right, so now we can move to the number 3. And maybe after this one, we'll do a pause. We think we want to look at it here. Okay. So here, yeah. So here it's the bubble charts. I think the previous example didn't have enough variables, and so it was just complicated to use. So I took this data set here from the empty cars data set in R. I think it's a subset of it. And so we basically do bubbles. So the bubble chart. Now again, the bubble chart, it's a chart. So it has 2 axes. I don't confuse them. So there is an X and a Y variable, and then the bubble radius or diameter, or whatever you want to call it, is the last, the 3rd variable. Now, if you think in terms of aesthetics, you can add to that because you can set a color, you can set a pattern. You can encode more variables than what you see there, right? You can use the border to encode another variable. That's sometimes done when you want to highlight some or subset a data set. So the minimum is the 3 variable, right? Now, if I do this, is that a bubble chart? Yes, no? It can be a bubble chart or it can be a bubble cloud. I decide to do a cloud like this, whatever. That's my preference. Where in the cloud, the exposition here, right? This position X here doesn't really matter. We don't care, right? You make it so that it's nice for you. If I want to put them in a line, maybe I think it's nice because that's the space I have to work with. Or it can be a bubble chart where I encode 1 variable on X, and then a 2nd variable on the radius, and the Y And the y is set to 0, right? The y is the third variable that I only have to work with, so I do it this way. So this is a one-dimensional bubble chart, right? So don't get confused between those. It's up to you what you want to do there. Is there anything? Yeah. So here we use you see the same pattern that we did before with the bars. That is that we get the selection, and then that is the SVG in this case. I think before it was HTML, and then we add first the bubble, and then we add the text inside. Again, we're doing. We're trying to use the data join to add two elements for the same data, really. Yeah. Again, you have all these little maths here to keep things in check. And here I'm deciding to set up the x and the y. You see, because I didn't have them, so I just set up any x and y, and so these are going to come in x is linear, so we're going to have them in a line, and the height is fixed based on the viewport on the SVG. So it's going to be something like this, which is fine. Here you have more variables, so if you want, you can also turn it into 2D, right? In that case, what you do is here, instead of coming up with a number for the x coordinate of the bubble, then you just put the value for the variable that you want to map. Now, obviously, each time you map a variable in a fixed space, because this is graphing in a fixed space, so your graphic is like this. And you want all your graphic elements to enter in there. And your data is never, or almost never, at the same scale as the plot. So you need to use a scale. So we're going to see how to use a scale this week on Wednesday. But in the meantime, you need to do some type of math to figure out the scale by yourself, right? And so most of the time we just use a linear scale. So you map your data point to a function of ax plus b, or ab plus b. You want to go in this notation, right? And you start figuring this out so that you see all your data point in there. So the scatter plot is just basically the same thing. Here I think we just change. So here we're using an array of objects, and here we're just using an array of arrays. So yeah, so you just need to change a little bit the code around, but whatever data structure you come up here, you can reuse it down here, right? Now, yeah, because I think it's asked for the same data, right? Yeah, it's 3-1. So I think I simplified that. In the old one was different. Okay. Now you have probably seen that you have paid attention. So this is a lot of code, right? So if I really need to do this in a page. So here the code is given, so you just cut and paste. If you really want to do this for real, then because you're in a job and you pay for it, if you start putting all this code into one page, things get messy. So the best way to do it is to have separate script files and CSS files, and then reuse both as much as possible. So here is two different types of plots. So you see here we have the circle and the line axis. So Yeah, so the problem with this is that here I'm calling, I'm giving it a name, right? So it's only the things that are circles. So if you want to, you have, say a bubble chart, and then I don't know, another plot that uses bubbles. Then you want to see what you can reuse of the same commonality. And so it's fine to call it circle if it only applies to all the circles that you're using in your figure, so that that can be reusable. Otherwise, you want to spatialize it. This will see usually the axis, you don't have different aesthetics for the axis, so that's definitely something that you want to reuse in a CSS. And so you see that here we have a conflict with the circle, because we have circle dot bubble. Yeah, I removed the conflict by calling it circle dot. Okay. So can somebody explain to me what this means here? Why this is working for the scatter plot, circle dot dot, and this circle dot bubble is working for this bubble chart? Just what is this, and what why is it working?
You set the class as bubble. So when you got it, it picks up that class.
Right. So this is our CSS selector that we use to select elements. What type of elements? Does it say SVG? No. So the selectors, they don't say what it is. You just use them to select, right? So it happens that SVG has an element that is called circle. So this only is going to apply to things that are elements of type circle, right? So SVG has one, but if I'm working with a framework, maybe I'm going to create my own circle, and then that will apply to that. Okay. And then it's the dot bubble. There is no space, because otherwise it would be an N. And so it means that it's a circle with class bubble, right? Right. So yeah, I want to differentiate the aesthetics of the bubble chart and of the scatter plot. In the scatter plot, I call my points dot for that, and I set the class, right? So the class is an attribute, so I can use this syntax, or you can use, there is a class dot class, where I think you can decide to remove it or add the class dynamically. And that's useful when you start animating things around. In this case, it's static, so just setting it, setting the class as an attribute will work quite well. Yeah. So the other thing that you can reuse here in this page is the data set, right? If you go with the one from example 3.1, so is it going to, do you need to repeat this var data set, or how does it work? So higher up in the page, we're going to paste this code, right? And then realize it with the data set of 3.1. So we're going to have this definition. So this is another example. And here you see that the data set is different in format, right? So if I want to reuse this code and reuse the data set that I have above with the same syntax, then I need to change the code, right? And I don't need this definition anymore. Or I have the choice to take the data set that I have there and turn it into an array of arrays, which to me doesn't sound that appealing, because I don't like to write code to change the format of the data in the page. So that you just want, the page is done, whatever JavaScript you put in the page, it needs to be executed. And so you only want to put the minimum that is needed. You don't want to start doing computation in the page, because then everything is going to come to an halt and people need to wait for the computation to finish to see what is in the page, especially if you're not careful. There are workarounds, but that's not the point of JavaScript on the client side to do calculation on reformatting and or doing computation on the data. Yeah. So if you do that, maybe to finish on this, if you do that and then you have your data set, and you want to make sure that your is not going to be overwritten, what do? So suppose that I change the code here so that it works with the data set that I'm going to define for this here first, when I realize the first plot. So how do I declare this data set so that I make sure that I don't make mistakes and override it? That's a question, a simple question that has to do with the way you define it here. You define the variable, right? So you remember var, what happens to the var data set when this is first read by the browser? Yes, no? Okay, so there are two parts here, right? So there is the var data set equal. So the equal part is the assignment, and the var data set is the declaration. What happens to the declaration when you declare with var? It's hoisted to the top of the scope. What is the scope here? Is this page, right? It's just this page. Is the document that is attached to this page that is realized here. And so here the first time we see script is here, so it's already at the top of the scope and is going to stay there. If I want to make sure that this data set doesn't change, then what I do is that instead of var, I'm going to use a const. Okay, so if you want, I can just cut and paste these so you see what I mean. Okay, so this is the first one. Okay, and then we'll take a break. Check. Okay, here we see our bubbles, and then we're going to go and cut and paste this one. Okay, so we have our starting plot. Okay, so now I want to say reuse the same data set, and I don't want to duplicate the code. So I'm going to come here and I say, so you see that here there is a var data set, and at the bottom there is another var data set, right? So what is really happening is that what the script is going to do is this. This is how it reads it, right? And same thing for the bottom one. So the bottom one that is down here, the var is now up there, and this is what happens, yeah? So this doesn't change anything in the page. as you would expect. But now say that I want to fix this one so that nobody messes up with it. Then I just go there and put a const here. Right. So the second one now doesn't have the var, but if you don't put the var, it's the same thing as putting it. It doesn't do anything. But now we're going to get an error in the page. And you see this is not happening. And it's not happening because we get the error with the const. Assignment to constant variable, okay? So, yeah, useful to use the const. Yeah, you still need to think when it's appropriate to do so, based on code reusability. Okay, so we're going to do a 10-minute break, and then we'll come back to this. Okay, so I'll get restarted. We're still in pause, but I'll try to answer a question from the audience here. So if you're interested, you can listen in. Yeah, or maybe not, because it seems that people are busy. Okay, I'll give them a few minutes more, and then I'll be back. Okay, so I'll get restarted with a question that I had from someone here. So this is about debugging in general, and then I think that to say, but so when you have something that doesn't work, whatever code you write, it seems that it's a JavaScript feature. You end up having something that doesn't work when you're done. So try to be methodic about it, and don't freak out, because it's going to happen systematically. So the first thing is see what part of the code is not working. You look at it, and a lot of time it's just that you have a typo or something, and then you see it right away, and you fix it. If you don't see anything obvious, try to put a console log where you think that the problem is happening, just to check that where is the location that the problem is happening. Okay, and you know, a lot of time that already is sufficient to resolve the problem. Otherwise, you need to find out the lines of code where the problem is coming up, and formulate some hypothesis. And then you do that, the debugging, either by putting some more console logs, if it's simple, and if not, you just go in the browser and you trace it. You put a breakpoint, you reload the page, and you look at the variables, and you resolve it quickly. The second, so this is called debugging code. Okay. Now debugging errors, sometimes they're not directly related to the code, but they're related to the browser. So somebody had a fetch error. Can you? I don't know what the fetch error. Yeah, he's typing. Yeah. Okay. Can you share your fetch error? Just read it so that I can write it down. Yeah, the error message. Just the gist of it. Yeah, but for okay, so fetch API cannot load fetch. I don't know if there is a team fetch, but okay. And it's then it gives a URL, no? 5. And here there is a pass, no? Pass, and then I don't know, it was cars.csv. Okay. So here is not your code, but it's somebody else's code. And you want to look at this and say, okay, where can it happen in my code? Okay, so where, because this is not your code. So you need to understand where this is coming from, okay? And so that's the first step, to try to understand it. Now the fetch API is an API that does the AJAX, the asynchronous JavaScript calls to get stuff from servers, right? So you remember that you have a server, and then you have your browser that is a client. Yeah. And so when you want to get data from a server, you do an HTTP request, and then you get back your data in some form as allowed by the server, right? Now this mechanism is implemented with a fetch. Now in this case, you're trying to load this file, and this is the clue that tells you where it's happening in the code with d3. You do d3.csv of cars.csv. So now you know which line it is, and you need to understand why this fetch is not able. Now you need to keep in mind that this mechanism is working with a server because your browser is the client, and so the browser has some restrictions. One of the main one is that it cannot access files in your drive. Okay, so you're asking the browser to use this fetch API through d3.csv. Okay, because d3.csv, why do we want them to re-implement something when it's available already? And to get this file, how do you know that it's getting it in your drive? It tells you. You see the file protocol is file as opposed to HTTP. Yeah. So your browser is talking to the file system and through fetch and say, give me this file. Yeah. And the browser by default will not do this for security reasons, because otherwise I'm sitting at home and I come and I read stuff on your drive about your bank account, or you know, I'm impersonating you in some way, and so the browser by default, when it's coded in the page with JavaScript, because with the file you can load the file. When you double click the file, it will show up in the browser, and so the browser goes and gets the file, to be clear, right? And that's fine. It's allowed because you're asking your operating system to open the files in the browser, and so that's fine. But here we're asking through the browser to go and open this file. And this page, the browser doesn't know where it's coming from. This could come from another website, right? And I can put some malicious JavaScript in there that is going to try to read this file on your drive. And so the browser says, I'm not allowing this. And the way it says it is that it throws an error, and that fetches reports the error. Okay. So here what is the problem? The problem is that we're not running a web server, because otherwise we would not do a file request. Yeah. I'm sorry, I didn't. Is that the error?
Yes.
Right. So here we're doing a file request because you were not running the browser sync. Right. So the browser sync, what it does is that it creates a server, and then the browser is talking to the server, and the server is going to return to say, okay, you have the right to read this file. Okay. There is another complication that is also for a security reason, is that if I have two servers here, and I'm getting a page from server A, and I want to go read something from server B in this way, then this is called a cross-site request, and the browser will not let you do that unless B says it's okay for you to get this data. And you will get something similar to that. It's not going to be a file error with a file protocol, but it's going to be HTTP. But it will tell you that it's a cross-site request, and that was not allowed by the server, by the server. Okay. So those are tricky to debug, but I think we've seen this already. Or, I mean, at least we described this, but I think a reminder is useful. Number four. Was it here? No, not this one. EX4. So here, basically, you see that you can know how to do all the basic plots. At this point, so you know to do bar charts, scatter plots, bubble charts, right? So all those are fairly basic, and you know how to do them. Now, you saw the work that I had to do to go and edit JavaScript and stuff. That's painful, and a lot of time these data sets are already formatted in either CSV or JSON. So it's convenient to just say go and get them. And so what do you want to use for this? Well, you use exactly this, right? You want to use the fetch API in a way that is convenient for you, which means that you're going to use with D3. So D3 has the functionality to just go and get a CSV file or a JSON file. Now here we're doing the homework locally. And up until now, we had all the data in the page. So we never got into this problem. But now if you just go and implement this code and you load the page, you will see the error with the fetch API because you cannot do this. Yeah. The browser forbids you. So you do need to, as soon as you put the data outside and you use JavaScript to get it, you do need to run a server. Okay. And the browser sync does the right thing. So it returns the data nicely where it does. Okay, so the rest here, I think is mostly straightforward. We're doing here, we're changing, we're making sure that the types are correct when we read it. So why is it that we're doing this? Why do we need to do this? Because here I'm passing numbers here, right? Why do I need to write all this code here? Help somebody. So here the code is, so this is so let's try to understand it first. So the d3.csv takes here two arguments. The first one is a name, and if you look in the doc, this can be a URL. And then the second one is a function that goes through here. It's d, so it iterates through the data. And in this case, it's actually going through the rows. Sorry, through each line. And you see that as it reads this file, it returns the data based on the column name. So that's why when you write the column name, you want to make it easy to access for the reason that I've discussed earlier. You don't want to access strings as strings, you want to access with the dot notation. So here it's all nicely already set up for us by default. And it's the same thing that you have in notebooks, right? You don't want to go in notebooks with 50-character variables around, because otherwise you spend your day writing code. And then here we have a chance to go through basically each row here, and we get and do something with each one of the variables. The values that are related to each one of the variables, one per column, right? And then we have this dot then. Can somebody tell me what the dot then is? So we saw this in class last time. So these are asynchronous functions because they need to go outside and get some data, and it might take a long time. So they run asynchronously. In the old times, you had callback functions. And now it's implemented as promises. And so the way the promises work is that you call the function, and when the function gets the data from a remote server or wherever you're asking for it, we'll make the data available in the .then function. This is standard. So now you know that when you want to call any promise, the only thing that you need to do is look for the input arguments that are required, and then you put a .then, and you know that you're getting your data in there. Okay? Because before this was done with a callback function, and the callback functions are tons of arguments, in particular for the error handling that was paid. So now if you have an error, you can get it by just putting .catch, and you can get your error there, and it's straightforward, there is no thinking. So here, whenever the data is made available and it went through the first function, then we can do something with it. Okay, so the only thing I'm doing is I'm turning it back into a string and printing it out. Right. So what is this pluses? What are these pluses here? So I think you need to look at the class material, but the pluses is doing a quick conversion between a string and a number. So it's basically doing a cast. It's trying to do an addition operation on a string, which means that there is no type check done, as opposed to the function call that you can use to convert a string to an integer or a float number, floating point number. But here we know what it is, so we don't want to do any check, and we want to do it fast. So this means that with CSV, everything that you read are strings, right? And that makes sense because there is nothing in here that tells you what is the type of this data, right? There is nothing that tells you that. So if you go with SVG, with CSV, the first thing is that you must 90.9% of the time, unless you just have categorical data, you will need to cast it. And if you don't cast it, nothing apparent is going to, you won't have any error message because there is no way for the software to know the type of the variables. But obviously whatever you're going to plot is not going to make sense. Now that problem is allegated with JSON, so it works exactly the same. And you see that JSON has only one argument because you don't need to do anything to it, right? It's already set up for you. Because in JSON you can specify numbers by just not plotting them. They're set up as a string in the file because the JSON is just a big string, right? That it gets returned at this point. But you see that the string is not plotted, and so you can expect that these that are not plotted are going to be treated as numbers. Okay, and that's the main reason why using JSON is more convenient for you than the CSV format. And then this is in general, it's not just about the JavaScript. Okay, so this one I guess is just about putting the data in, and that is basically readily available, but you need to appreciate the background. Okay, so yeah, this one is just some plots with Vega and Vega Lite. So you remember we did some of those. So here it's a little bit more complicated in the sense that you might want to use the data from a file. So the code is more complicated, but it basically is the same complexity in terms of the plotting. So I've given you some code there and some options to deal with something that is always happening when you're dealing with data, is that you need to do some data wrangling. And in this case, it's simple what we need to do. Here we're trying to filter a few of the data in this data set. So these are countries, so we don't want to deal with all of them. We just want to filter ours. So how do you do it? You can either go to Python and then you go back to your plotting code, and in the meantime you export what you need to export to load for your plotting code, or you can do it in the Google Sheet. So this works as long as you don't have too much data. And now if you are ready with this, so here I'm getting directly to the file because probably you remember when we tried to get the repository, it takes forever because this is huge. So here we're starting to get some scalability problems with already this data set. So just loading it into Google Sheet is Google Sheet are doing a very good job, but still it's a lot of rows, and the size of it make it difficult to work in the data sheet. In top of that, this data set has the wrong format, right? So I don't know if you look at it; these are time series, and what we want is more what you have in what you would use in Notebook. So we want the data frame format, where each row is one observation, and we don't have data in the middle of the table. And so doing that in Google Sheet is not trivial. And if you go there, you can, I show you how I did it, which was Yeah, once you know the formula, it's not a big deal. But still here, I don't know how many columns we had, and you need to go and select manually those columns. So it's kind of tricky to do. And the more data you have, the more this becomes feasible. So the other option is to do it in JavaScript. So you can put your JavaScript either in a Node app, such as the one that we played around with during the first week, I think, or you can put it in your page. So here I do it in the page, which is okay if things are not too complicated, because then you can debug your code in the page. The usefulness of putting it in a script is that then you know where to go get it back, and you know, if you have similar type of data, you can reuse it easily. But anyhow, so this one is the code that I wrote here. So I'm going to execute it. This is 5. This is 5. So I mean, there is no expectation that you know to write this thing, and you know, some of this I went and had to look them up, but oh, we need the data. We need the data. We need the data. Okay. So I'm using wget, or if you can use curl or any other thing that works. You can even go in the browser and copy and paste. Are we at the right spot? No. CD lab. Okay, so we got it. Okay, so what happened is that I didn't have the data, so nothing happens here, right? So here we're doing the D3 CSV, and I created this file that has the data that was that I just got with the wget command, and here we get our data in this white format. So let's go and look at it. So you can see what it is. Oh. So here we're filtering it already. Console.log. Yeah, as usual, I'm with the errors. Okay, here. Messages. Okay, so you see that we have 179 rows, and here they are. Okay, so and we as you would expect with the field.csv, you get them as objects, and you see that they're named after whatever they decide to name them. So now I'm not interested in the province state, so I'm going to filter that out. And this county region here, I don't want to go around with the string, so I'm going to replace that. Lat long is fine, probably, no, I don't need it, so I'm going also to remove it. And here the date, you see that we have for each one of the rows are day as day calendar day / value, and the calendar day is a key, which in a data frame format is a no-no. So what we're going to do is that we're going to create a variable for the date, and then create a long format. So we have rows that look like this. right? Where we have country, date, and count. So you have, multiple rows for the same country. And this is the output of the script. If you're interested, I can tell you more about how it works. But let me see if there is something that, yeah. I mean, I'm using the for each. You can use the for. So when you do loops, you have three options. Loops on arrays. Right? So you can loop on array. You can do the for I equals 0, I lower than array dot length I plus. Yeah. And then you do array of I. Okay, that works. But again, this is array of I is lower if I have an array of year of country, and if I do array and country is the first one, array of 0, this is lower than to write array of, it's lower in terms. It's lower in terms of runtime to write array of the whatever variable here. Than to go with the index. Yeah. And that's another reason why you want to use the dot again. So this is more verbose than this other option that is the array dot for each. And I tend to prefer this one because this is the same syntax that you have with most of the D3 functionality. So this should be familiar. And then you can put the curly braces and return whatever you need to do operation on the array plus 10. Okay. So you can write it like this, or you can write it really short and like this. This is okay. So if it's just the return value, you don't need to put anything around. This will do it. Okay, so you'll see in my code, I do this for D3 oftentimes. And then you have also this other option that is for D in array. That's the other way of doing it. So I prefer this one when because of it works the same as the functionality in D3. The delete there, I just want to get rid of this key value there, so I just I just use the delete that deletes the key. I think we've seen this. Okay. Now here functions are objects, so I'm doing a function expression here to do the conversion to CSV to write it out. Because after I put in long format, I want to print it this way, and so this function is going to do it. And it's a little bit complicated because I need to undo the things with the keys. Because the data here is in the form of an object, right? As you can see down here in the trace, and so I need to turn it around. Yeah. So there is no such a thing as new lines in HTML. So I need to replace with line breaks. So that does it. And you see that I'm using D3 to do that, but I don't use text. Why would I not use text? So text, you remember, sets the text of a div or SVG text element, right? But what I want to do is that I want to add HTML to a node. because this is HTML. This is not a text. What I want is to see an actual line break in the DOM here, right? And here you're manipulating the DOM. You're not writing HTML. This is not PHP, right? And so the difference between you remember the dot text in the tree. In the tree, you have here your node for whatever it is, a paragraph, right? And the text is here. It's another node. Yeah, this is the text. So it's another node in the tree. And so the dot text, v3 dot text goes and changes the text in this node. The HTML, what it does is that it appends some HTML. I actually appends another whatever you want to append. And here I'm appending a node of type the line break. Okay, so sorry, I know like a box. Okay, so it's not the content of it. I could say if I want to add an old table, I could use that. In that case, I would have a hierarchy of nodes. So okay, so this is rather long, but I think you have it. Okay. Yeah. So here it's obvious. Once you have the data to go get the spec from the website for the sample, you make it work, and then you adapt the data to have it set up. The multi-series line chart does the same. Yeah. No questions. Okay. So if we have, we don't have time because it's 53. Okay. Okay. So let's see. We'll probably talk about the projects next time, but let me know if you have questions about it. Okay.